Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Round Table Battlefield. Cullen and Kevin back once again.
Sounds so violent when you say it like that.
Well, this is a violent show. We have to show how serious and aggressive we are.
I think you're right. Yes, violence is the topic of today's show. The worst kind of violence, even.
Yes, the dreaded W word, war.
What's it good for?
War never changes, as one video game once said.
Absolutely nothing was your line.
Absolutely nothing. So today we're going to be talking about a war that's been going on for just shy of 3 calendar years.
Yeah.
We are talking about the Russian-Ukrainian war. More specifically, since Donald Trump's inauguration back in January, do we think that Donald Trump can successfully end the war in Ukraine?
Can it even happen?
Can it even happen?
Is it even within the realm of possibility?
So we have some opinions, and we're just going to have a discussion about it. We're not going to, I don't think we're going to.
Well, I've got a gun under the table. I don't know about you.
Well, I have a couple missiles underneath my chair, so we'll see.
There's missiles everywhere.
There's like laser pointers pointed right at
Yeah.
our foreheads right about now.
All right. Well, let's go over our positions because we should each declare a position, and then the audience will know what is driving our viewpoints. So, can Trump stop the Ukrainian war soon? I'm going to say that I think he can. I think it's a pretty quick. It's going to be a pretty quick affair.
I am under the belief of no. Right out of the gate, I think what Trump is going to try and propose is going to be something that Ukraine does not want, or it's not going to meet what they think is a fair compensation for them, since they've been, the unfortunate, recipient of this war.
And they have a country to rebuild.
Exactly.
So a lot of money.
And I have a feeling that Trump is not going to present a deal that Ukraine's going to like. I think Russia will love it. And the United States will love it, but Ukraine won't. And because of that, I think Ukraine will walk away from the table unless the United States gives them pretty much close to everything that they want.
Well, and that's kind of what I thought I'd ask you. What would it take, do you think? What could Trump offer Zelensky to walk away? Well, Zelensky and Russia. What could he give Russia, and what could he gives Zelensky to get it? Like, is there anything, like maybe the answer is there's absolutely nothing, that, they're locked into this conflict, and that they're going to resolve it however way they do it. Or maybe there is something. That's what I'm curious.
I think there is something that Trump can give to Ukraine that will make them walk away. Or sorry, they'll sign the paper and say, yes, this war is done. And I think that'll be 2 things. Ooh. And you can argue one of them might be enough begrudgingly, but I think they would say a full-flung yes if it was presented. Number 1, all territory that's been stolen by Russia is returned, and that means Crimea and all of what's been taken in the east. And also Ukraine withdraws from the slight bits of territory they've taken from Russia in previous months. Mm-hmm. Number 2, guaranteed defense by the United States, aka a look at ascending into NATO.
Yeah.
If 1 or 2 of those things are presented, it'll be a yes. Again, if it's just 1, begrudgingly. But that, of course, comes with problems because good chance Russia is going to say no to both of them or either one of those.
Yeah, I can't see Russia budging on Crimea. And just for access, I think it's the Black Sea. That they use that. So they need a naval port. That's national security. That's going to be really high on Russia's list. Is at least access to that port. Yeah,
because the whole reason, well, not the whole reason, but one of the main reasons why they took Crimea is because Russia has no year-round ice-free warm water ports. Yeah, and you would think for a country as big as Russia and how much water they don't have a single port that is completely unfrozen for the entirety of the year.
Yeah, that's incredible. Maybe they're causing global warming. It's a Russian plot. We just figured it out. Big news.
Well, it is funny you say that, because I think one of the countries that I think is probably going to drag its heels on climate change is Russia, because they could probably look at how much they would benefit, because they have a ton of land and natural resources when it comes to farming and timber, that with higher global temperatures, they could benefit a lot from it in their current state. So I think they'd probably be one to drag their heels about it.
Yeah, they're farmable, arable land mass would probably double.
Probably. And also that would give them more ice-free warm water ports as well. So they're probably like going, hooray.
And maybe Siberia becomes a tropical destination. Who knows? I think there was one other point that you had made. Crimea was the other one, and I think all of the previous borders established it. No, that was tied in with Crimea, and then there was another reason. That Zelensky would have to receive in order to agree to a...
Well, yeah, like that would be, I guess, all the... like the other reason, defense from the United States.
Yes.
Or becoming a part of NATO.
Or NATO. And I think we all know that Zelensky wants to be part of NATO, or Ukraine wants to be in NATO for obvious reasons. That's a no-brainer. Now, of course, what's Putin going to think about that? And I think Putin has actually been resolutely steadfast clear. And that's his line in the sand, that Ukraine joining the NATO means the bombs just start flying. Because he knows what Putin knows, that he's not able to defend against NATO. Like NATO is a super amalgamation of superpowers.
And if Ukraine joins, then they are more or less a cornered rat, because when you look at how Sweden and Finland broke their infamous neutrality on NATO, so you have Sweden, and then you have all the Baltic states that joined in the early 2000s. Of course, then you have Belarus, which is the only country that wouldn't be a part of it. But then if you add Ukraine, they're cornered on all, like, from entirely like one side.
Well, yeah, and we haven't even talked about the new bases that are going to go up in Greenland. Now, the Greenland and Trump are buddy-buddy. Norway said, well, how about if we just let you build a couple of bases on the on the edge of Greenland? And Trump seemed to like that idea. And I suspect that it's all an effort to put pressure on Russia to, concede some of these points like that you mentioned. I'm not sure that NATO will be a good result for the world, but if there's a bunch of ICBM silos in the northern tip of Greenland, I can't see Putin being too thrilled about that. So maybe one will leverage the other, right? Maybe we won't go and maybe we won't get NATO. Maybe we won't get Greenland, but maybe they will get Crimea, and they'll work out access to a port, a narrow corridor of Russian territory, whatever that final deal looks like. Now, what I think Russia is going to need in order to stop this war is they're going to need a demilitarized zone, something between Ukraine and Russia. Now, whether that demilitarized zone is Ukrainian territory or Russian territory, that's going to have to be worked out. But I think it's a definite must-have as far as Russia. And I think a demilitarized zone would even benefit Ukraine, so I bet you it's going to be on offer. I think Trump is going to say, well, we're going to make a 20-mile corridor between Russia and Ukraine. We'll call it, wheat fields, farmland, things that are dependent by both. Everyone needs to eat. So Russia and Ukraine will benefit by calling this swath of land farmland only, no tanks allowed. That seems like something that everybody could get on board with. We know farmers first all the time. So I think that will be on offer, but I don't know if it's going to be enough. I think guarantees to not have NATO is going to be a Putin must-have. A demilitarized zone is going to be a Putin must-have. Access to Crimea is going to be a Putin must-have. Now, if you got all of those three things together and laid it on the table for Russia, Russia is in a position where they are looking to end their embargoes. They're looking to end this depressed economy. Russia would be doing a lot better if they had some of their nice toys back, because they've been confiscating everything Russian owned all over the world from all of their oligarchs or whatever the higher up people are called. And I'm sure they all want their toys back.
And I imagine a lot of that would get sold off instantly because they are broke as can be.
Yeah, they're broke, and so I think they're ready to deal. I think they need a couple of concessions, like I just mentioned. Now, as far as what Zelensky will say yes to, boy, oh boy, he has a lot of pressure behind him. He's kind of in a corner. He doesn't have a lot of options. His money supply is weakening. It's not evaporating, but it's definitely weakening now that Trump is auditing basically the American Foreign Affairs, the USAID outfit. So their money supply is maybe not drained, but it's definitely something that they're talking about, and it's going to put Zelensky in the mood to deal. Because as soon as when your money is going up, let's talk tough talk. But when the money supply is going down, it's going to change some attitudes. I suspect that if Trump goes one step further and says the audits are going to continue until we're not wasting any money, not even a penny, and if Trump sees that as a leveraging tool in order to get Zelensky to deal, he might go whole hog and say, find all the money that's going to Ukraine. Stop it all, because that'll get him into the bargaining table. So that's something that I think can affect this decision about whether or not Trump can stop this war. If he can stop the money successfully, I think there's a really good chance that Zelensky will see that and maybe reevaluate his position a little bit. Is the rest of the money that he's getting enough to put on a defense, put up a defense against Mother Russia? Well, it depends how much money it is, right? And how many foreign fighters they can hire and how much weapons they can procure. All of those things takes a lot of logistics to run a war. And the failure of any one of them really can end the house of cards falls down. I think Trump's in a position where once he takes out the money, once he makes a credible offer, access to the Black Sea, demilitarized zone, and we'll talk about NATO. Like, that's probably how it's going to get worded. We'll, maybe next year we'll look at NATO, or maybe the year, and then they'll just keep pushing it forever and ever and ever just to extend the stalemate. I'm hopeful, at least in a sad way, that Trump's withdrawal of foreign aid to Ukraine will be extended as an offer or as a tool to force peace, and will be separate from the aid money that's coming in to rebuild, right? If Trump said there's no more money for fighting, but we got a boatload of cash to rebuild, all you have to do is say war's over. And then we unlock this vault of money and we come and we start rebuilding ground up. That's got a nice ring to it. It has a finality to it. It has oh, thank goodness it's over. It has, hey, now we get, maybe we're going to get some new jacuzzis and hot tubs around here. I'm just being silly. But it has a new beginning attached to it that I think the world opinion may be sufficient, that even though we know Zelensky is going to have a hard time agreeing to this offer, I think world opinion might get him there. And when he adds up his bank accounts, maybe that'll be the final nail in the decision, and he's going to go, fine, all right, let's shut this whole thing down. Time will tell.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot to unpack, but it's tricky because, again, I want to kind of talk about how Zelensky is very cornered in what he's doing, because Ukraine doesn't like Russia. They historically have not liked Russia. They do not want to lose, and they don't want to give up any of their land further to Russia. And I can see how Zelensky doesn't want to negotiate with Trump, because is Trump a trustworthy person? I don't think he is. I think that
it's tough to put a politician under the trustworthy banner at any time, really.
But Trump seems to be one of those ones where he's not. I don't think he's in full support of Ukraine. I honestly doesn't because, and this is starting to get into my own belief that I don't really think that Trump really doesn't give a damn. I think he just wants this war to end to look good for his own public image. I don't think he wants to end this war just for, okay, let's have peace and let's have all this. If you're Ukraine, you can't trust Russia anymore now. I don't think you couldn't have trusted them even after the Second World War, but you extra can't trust them now because everything from, Ukraine being invaded during the Russian Civil War, and then you had the Holodomor, the Second World War, all of the Red Purges. And then in the 90s, when the Soviet Union dissolved, Ukraine agreed to give back the nuclear weapons that were in their territory to Russia. A bad move in hindsight, because they were given the promise that their territorial integrity would not be violated. And let me see how that went.
What I do know for sure is that Russia invaded and then they stopped. Now, we could argue maybe Ukraine beat them back or pushed them back or did something to negate Russia's advances. That all is probably true. However, Russia did progress, and then they did stop, and then the stalemate started, and we've been, skirmishing back and forth, but there's been no major territory changes in quite a while. So that makes me think that Russia was motivated, i.e., to capture that territory, but that they were also then motivated to be done there. Like, other than the skirmishes, there's been no major territories grabbed. So I'd like to hear what your opinion is on why do you think he took that territory with such gusto in the beginning, and then why there's been very little territory exchange since then.
I think it's very clear. Putin has a complete wet dream fantasy to reclaim the former Soviet Union. The guy worked for the regime. He wants that old country back. And that initial swift invasion from all sides into Ukraine, he wanted to take Kiev in 3 days. He wanted the country gone, and he wanted Zelensky assassinated, and Zelensky narrowly dodged assassination attempts. Then when that clearly failed, and because I think the Russians only prepared for the war to last a couple of days, and then when that failed, they pulled back and thought, because Ukrainian resistance was much higher than they suspected. The old Russian bear war machine is it's clearly a farce. You've seen they're relying on North Korean soldiers now to bolster their lines, and they're relying on old Soviet World War II era technology just to get by. Clearly, this country is not the big bad scary villain superpower that we all thought they were. The only reason they still have this superpower label is because they have nuclear weapons. If they weren't, they're no much more stronger of a country than. Take your pick.
Yeah.
But he wanted to reform, wanted to reclaim the Soviet Union. But I think at that point when he realized he couldn't capture Ukraine, he then went, okay, well then let's just consolidate what we already have. Because they swiftly captured all that land on the southern area, like up from Crimea and from, the two, forgive me if I mispronounce them, but Donetsk and Luhansk, I think it was. The two regions that Putin declared as like independent countries.
Yeah.
So he wanted to kind of stake that up. And I think the other part of it too, he wanted a safety zone from NATO. That was another thing I was going to say, because that's the thing. When the Soviet Union first fell in the early 90s, Gorbachev, was it Gorbachev or was it Yeltsin? I think it was Gorbachev. He had a kind of sort of half agreed verbal agreement from, I think it was H.W. Bush, that NATO would not advance their military bases past East Germany. Now, NATO has held up to that. There are no NATO bases east of East Germany. Yes, they have NATO members that are east of that, but their bases have not moved. But when in 2004, when they added the Baltic regions, like they were now within breathing distance of Ukraine, and Putin saw that as a threat. And because I think in his mind, he saw that as the West slowly wants to conquer and take control and destroy us. I think in reality, the actual reason was all of those Eastern Bloc countries wanted to be in the West, because after being under the Soviet Union and the harsh oppression and the Warsaw Pact, I think all those Eastern Bloc countries were fully justified in wanting to be in Ukraine, not be in Ukraine, be in NATO. Because what they do is their own prerogative, and they chose that. Over 80% of the country has to say yes in a vote to joining NATO, and that happened. And so if you have all these countries that, yes, they are east of Germany, and they're right up next to Russia. If you have all these countries that want to join your alliance, are you going to say no? No, you're going to say yes to it. And I think, but Putin, I think, read that as a threat that the West, he probably thinks that the West has some ulterior motive to slowly strangle and take out Russia. And I don't think that was the case at all, because you've clearly seen, like, I personally, I liked President Obama, but when I give so much credit, because during the 2012 debates, Mitt Romney, the Republican nominee, said Russia is a threat to us. And Obama just laughed in his face and said, no, it's not. Obama was clearly wrong and Romney was right. So I think Russia misinterpreted, and now because again, they've been doing all these invasions where they invaded Georgia, or the country of Georgia, and they want to put a buffer between them and the West, because they supposedly view all of these new countries joining NATO as they want to slowly take us out, when I think it's just NATO going, well, if they want to join us, I mean, why are we going to say no?
Yeah, they voted.
Yeah, they voted to it
It's a
themselves.
democratic process.
Like they voted, wanted, and asked to join. I don't think NATO ever coerced any of those countries saying, "Hey, you should join us so we can take out Russia." Right. They wanted to themselves for personal protection. That's their own prerogative, and Putin viewed that as a threat.
Yeah, and if Putin was a nicer guy, maybe if Russia wasn't quite so stingy,
they wouldn't have a reason to join. I think that's
maybe they'd want to join Russia's.
Exactly.
Maybe they'd join
that
the
is more
Warsaw
indicting
Pact, right?
on Russia. And if someone wanted to say, well, why didn't Ukraine join? Because Ukraine had Russian government feet-kissing presidents for a long time. They were so sucky to Russia. And then the second Zelensky got elected, or actually, sorry, no, I should back up. When the Ukrainian president, or the prime minister that got elected in 2014, was pro-European Union.
Right.
This wasn't even towards NATO. They just wanted to be a part of the European Union.
Yeah.
And Russia did not like that whatsoever. And then furthermore, when Zelensky gets elected in 2019...
It was a fairly controversial position in Ukraine.
It was very
though.
controversial.
Yeah.
But the people wanted it, at the end of the day. And then Zelensky comes in. He still has a pro-European stance in general. But I still don't think NATO, even if he wanted to join NATO in the back of his mind, I don't think publicly that was on his list of agendas. It was just to be a part of the European Union. Yeah. But then suddenly Russia then waging this war of aggression themselves, then that became, now we want NATO as well. So all of this really is just Russia's fault. Like, good night. But, but yeah.
Well, I kind of see it as divorced parents fighting over children.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah.
I don't know which one's mother. Well, we'll go mother Russia.
Sure.
All right, and daddy U.S. And then Ukraine is the kid.
Well, the whole Eastern Bloc pretty much is.
We could narrow down all of these countries and call them they're not children, obviously. But if we have to try to frame it in a reference that makes sense, I like to think of it as parents fighting over the kids, because the kids are, maybe I want to live with mom, maybe I want to live with dad. Maybe I want to wait and see who has the best offer. What kind of candy is at dad's house? Well, yeah, but mom lets me play video games. Well, dad, so the only reason I bring that up is because the worst thing parents can do when there is a separation with a child involved, the worst thing the parents can do is fight over who the kid likes the most. Now, what do you do with that? What you do with it is you try to get the parents together in the same room so that they can decide between themselves, not with Ukraine in the room, just the United States and Russia have to come down and agree to be good parents together, and then they can tell the kids what they decided. And not just Ukraine, but all of those Baltic states and all of those countries that are lured by the glimmer and the glitz of European Union and NATO membership. it's got to sound pretty enticing. And, if I was a Baltic country, I'd want in NATO. Of course I would. It's the most stable military power you can be a part of.
Strongest too.
Yes. So that represents safety and security, the most important things. Why Russia and Ukraine, Russia and the United States can't be good parents, that's between them. That's something that Trump is uniquely poised to try and get to the bottom of, which I don't think Biden was very interested in talking to Russia. I think he liked having Russia as the enemy. Let's all talk and say bad things about the enemy, so we know we're all good people, because we know who the bad people are. But I think now Trump has an unfortunate position, is now he's going to have to try and make friends with, have you ever decided to try and make friends with your ex-wife or ex-husband? It's not fun.
No.
So Trump's in that position. He's got to go to marriage counseling with Russia.
Yeah.
I don't, as funny as that is, I suspect that Trump is going to play the daddy role and go my way or the highway, and Russia's going to assume the mommy role. And I don't think Russia's going to even last in the room longer than 5 minutes, because as soon as Trump comes out with his first ridiculous statement, I can see Putin getting up and going, this was a giant waste of time, and walking out the room. However, does he come back? That's the question, right? After cooler heads prevail, after all of the emotions subside, then what happens? Do we actually get down to do some meaningful work? I think because of the financial situation of the world, with the U.S. deciding not to borrow their way out of all of their problems, fiscal responsibility seems to be the word of the day down south. I think that nail is too big. I think that nail, once that nail hits the coffin, I think it's all done, and I think it'll be just all you're going to see is Trump on TV going, "You're welcome." And that's how it will receive it as far as the media goes. Mm-hmm. What actually happens is we're not going to even probably be told some of those details. But that's what I expect to see in the news eventually. I suspect it's going to be a repeat of the Gaza announcement. Trump followed a similar playbook. I got Gaza figured out. Don't worry. It's all in good control. And it's going to be a resort. It's going to be beautiful. Best Gaza you've ever seen. Come down and visit sometime, unless you're Palestinian. Then maybe that won't work, right? But but I think he's going to simplify it, make it sound like it's so easy to do. Of course, nothing is ever easy, but he wants to be seen on camera going, done. It was all me. I did it. Yay me. Aren't I wonderful? And then move on to the next press conference. Yep. And, how we hammer out the little details, the fine print, how all of that works out. I can't wait to see what the Gaza fine print looks like. It's going to be amazing. Chances are we might get to read some of that before we read the Ukraine fine print. But, he's a steamroll. He's just every day there's a week's worth of news. It's great if you like the news. It's horrible if you don't like the news. So I really feel for people with anxiety right now, because wow, you can't keep up. You just can't keep up. And there's 1,000 things to talk about. Even doing a show like this, right? What do we want to talk about? Well, there's 50 things on the whiteboard, and we should just start throwing darts because the world is getting to be a very crazy place. Maybe it always was a crazy place, but maybe we're just finding out how crazy it actually was now, and how it all shakes out. Roll the bones, as they say.
Yeah. I think one of the things that my closing statement, I'll say, when it comes to this whole conflict and what I think should happen is, because I like how you said, a lot of this kind of seems to be like two divorced parents talking about the children.
Yeah.
And the child in this case, I think in this example, I'm going to say, use the analogy that I think the child in this case, Ukraine, is old enough to make its own decisions.
Yeah.
And I think really the best thing that they could do is listen to what Ukraine wants, since it was Ukraine that was invaded. That's been kind of trifled over by Russia for the last 11 years. And I think whatever Ukraine wants, I think that's how it should go, and not let the, mom and dad just, like puppets just control everything. Like if Ukraine wants all their land back and they want to join the West, I think that's their own prerogative. And but of course Russia doesn't want that. But the other thing I find interesting, because you brought up the Gaza thing, because obviously there's no, like you said, there is no easy solution to any of this. But it's interesting how Trump came out with such a, like he gave out
Gusto,
his,
even.
well, yeah, he just came out with this entire thing about how he's gonna do everything, and
had it in his back pocket for years.
Exactly. But all he said is, oh, I'll have the Ukraine war ended in 48 hours. ... He has not. I don't think he. I correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think he's said a single thing about what he wants to do with Ukraine. And me, I really support Ukraine and them in this conflict to my dying breath. And I worry in the sense that because he's not really being explicitly like what he wants as a plan, that to me makes me think that mom and dad they're actually secretly our friends, and they wanted to negotiate a deal, and they don't even care about what Ukraine wants. And I think Trump will just give Putin everything he wants. That's one less thing on his hands, because I think he's scared of Putin. I think he fears him. Like maybe he's kind of cowardly towards him. He doesn't want to stand up to him. And yeah, I know what you said, like Biden treated Russia as the enemy, but I like how Biden kind of stood up to Russia, saying like, no, like we're not letting you push around a country that clearly doesn't like you. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I just think Ukraine should have their demands met, since again this was a illegal war that was put on their soil for reason, because of the own self-interest of Russia that they will claim is the United States' fault, which I don't think that's true. So
one of the things I learned that I thought was it confused me, because I didn't understand it, and that was when I found out how many Russians live in Ukraine. Especially in the eastern,
in Crimea, especially
Crimea.
That was another one of the reasons, because I said earlier, like some of the reasons why, Putin did the whole like Crimea thing. Like the other major reason was that there's a few million Russians that live in Crimea,
right, yeah.
and in the in some of those eastern bordering regions on the proper mainland. So.
Yeah, and when I first read it, being just your standard average idiot, it really shocked me if there was all of this tension in Ukraine and Russia that ethnically there wasn't a more sharper divide between the Russian. And I was quite surprised to find out how integrated, especially the language, Russia and Ukraine are. They're very similar. And how most people in Ukraine can actually speak Russian.
Yes.
So, considering how closely tied they are, what I don't understand is how they maintain that level of integration, considering the tensions between them were so high for so long. And is it Russians trying to escape Russia to get to Ukraine, or is it that Ukraine is such a wonderful place that Russians are tripping over themselves to get to Ukraine? Those are the internal details that I don't know. But it always struck me as slightly confusing that they had such a high level of integration, considering all of the bad blood between them.
I would give some credence to the fact that I think that a lot of Russians wanted to leave Russia, because I mean, the thing is, with a country like Russia, I'm under the belief that it is a dictatorship. It's a dictatorship in disguise. They control the media, and you read some reports, a lot of people in Russia are completely brainwashed to what's going on in Ukraine, and completely brainwashed, and they believe everything Putin is saying. But I think a lot of the people who saw through that lie, they've already left. Like, because when you had that, what was it, a couple million people that fled Russia, especially when the mobilization demands came in, millions of people left. Tons of people were gone. And I mean, I think probably some of that, of those large portions of Russian people living in Ukraine, I think some of that was probably left over from the Soviet Union when it was just all one big country. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of those people probably could be people who have left, because I think most people who see through Putin have already left.
I suspect both countries have had their problems with draft dodgers. People are looking to get rid of. You can't fault somebody running away from conscription. It's just the most horrible thing you could ever do to a population, send them to war against their will. So I suspect there might be a little bit of that on both sides. I know that it's not a popular war in Russia. You see demonstrations in Moscow, not on a regular basis,
No, you
but
see
on a sporadic
You saw like a
basis.
couple of like little things throughout the war, but a lot of that police come right in and just
that's where I was going
grab
to
you
go
and
with
you're
that.
gone.
If it wasn't for the oppressive structure of the Russian political system, there'd probably be more demonstrations. But those little sporadic ones that's where I think, okay, so there is a spark of dissent within the Russian people. We would probably see more of it if it wasn't such an oppressive state, which is great news for Ukraine. I think that Ukrainian people and Russian people, I think once all of the politicians stop talking, I think they'd actually get along probably not bad. If they could get past all of their previous, the actions of the previous political leaders, if they can get past that, I think Russia and Ukraine might be incredibly good allies again, because I know some people that are both Russian. I know my buddy is Russian and his wife's Ukraine, and they have a beautiful family. They're wonderful people. And when I asked them about the war, they just said, you know what politicians do, we try not to concern ourselves with it. They obviously got out of Ukraine. They're in Canada now, and great for them. The best way to get away from war is find another house to live in, right? So
Run away.
Yeah, run away.
And millions of people have.
Yeah, and it's not a bad idea, and I'm glad that Canada is here in that regard, doing what we can at least, which, it isn't much, but we can at least give people a safe place to stay.
But with that, we are out of time. So thank you once again for another debate. It's a very sticky situation when it's war, and of course, I guess we can say properly, what is war good for?
Absolutely nothing.
There you go. Thank you for watching another episode of the Roundtable Battlefield, and from Kevin and Colin, we will see you next time.